Don't worry, you won't drown. Crap never sinks.
The smell of crude oil and diesel fuel clung to my clothes like a second skin as I pushed through the front door of our McMansion at 11:47 p.m. 15 hours on the rig, dealing with a busted pump jack and 3 prima donna roughnecks who thought they knew better than their supervisor. All I wanted was a cold beer and maybe 10 minutes of conversation with my wife that didn't revolve around her latest Instagram post or whatever lifestyle guru she'd discovered that week. Instead, I found Andrea in our bedroom, methodically folding designer clothes into her Louis Vuitton suitcase, the one I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary, back when I still thought expensive gifts might fill whatever hole had opened up between us. "Going somewhere?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. My work boots left muddy prints on her pristine white carpet, and I didn't bother apologizing. She didn't look up. "Girls' trip to Austin. Brittany found this amazing wellness retreat." Her voice had that practiced, casual tone she used when she was lying. After 8 years of marriage, I knew all her tells. "Wellness retreat." I repeated the words like they tasted bad. "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. She finally glanced at me, her perfectly made-up face scrunching in disgust. "God, Eli, you smell like a gas station bathroom. Can you shower before you track that mess through the whole house?" I watched her fold a black lace negligee, one I'd never seen her wear for me, and something cold settled in my chest. "Sure thing, sweetheart. Wouldn't want to mess up your perfect little world with my working man stench." "Don't be dramatic." She zipped the suitcase with more force than necessary. "Look, we need to talk when I get back. About us. About this." She gestured vaguely at the room, at me, at the life we'd built together. "About what exactly?" Andrea turned to face me fully, and for a moment I saw something almost like pity in her eyes. "I won't sacrifice my lifestyle for your oil field career, Eli. I just won't. I'm 32 years old, and I deserve better than coming home to someone who smells like machinery and talks about pump jacks over dinner." The words hung between us like smoke from a wellhead fire. I could have fought, could have reminded her that my oil field career paid for her lifestyle, her car, her endless shopping trips and spa days, could have pointed out that when we met, she'd claimed to love my blue-collar authenticity. Instead, I just nodded. Fair enough. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe disappointment that I wasn't going to make a scene. Fair enough, that's it. What do you want me to say, Andrea? You've made your position clear. You want someone who fits your Instagram aesthetic better than a guy with grease under his fingernails. I pushed off from the doorframe. Have fun at your retreat. I was halfway to the bathroom when she called after me. Eli, wait. But I was done waiting. I'd been waiting for 3 years for her to remember why she'd married me. Waiting for her to stop treating our marriage like a business arrangement that wasn't meeting her quarterly projections. Waiting for her to look at me like I was something more than an obstacle to her influencer dreams. The shower water ran black with oil field grime, and I let it wash away more than just the day's dirt. When I came out, Andrea was gone, her car backing out of our circular driveway with the urgency of someone escaping a crime scene. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in my recliner, the one piece of furniture in the house that was actually mine, not something Andrea had chosen to photograph well. The silence felt different now, not empty, but expectant, like the moment before a controlled explosion when everyone holds their breath to see how much rock is going to move. My phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor. Carver, corporate approved your transfer request. Supervisor position opens Monday at the Permian site, $210K base plus housing allowance. You still interested? I'd submitted that application 6 months ago, back when Andrea and I were fighting about everything and nothing. Forgotten about it until now. The Permian Basin job would mean living in a company trailer for months at a time, overseeing 3 drilling teams across West Texas. Good money, but it would take me away from home even more. I typed back, send me the paperwork. 3 days later, I was loading my pickup truck with everything I actually cared about, which turned out to be surprisingly little. My tools, some clothes, a few books, and the framed photo of my dad from when he'd worked the oil fields in the 70s. Everything else belonged to Andrea's carefully curated vision of what our life should look like. Mrs. Hargrove, our 70-something neighbor, watched from her garden as I made trip after trip to the truck. She was the kind of woman who knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves, and her presence at her roses was about as subtle as a blowout. Moving out, dear? She called, not bothering to pretend she wasn't being nosy. Work assignment? I replied. Few months in West Texas? And Andrea, still on her wellness retreat, far as I know. Mrs. Hargrove's expression suggested she knew exactly what kind of wellness Andrea was retreating to, but she just nodded and went back to her roses. I was loading the last box when I saw it. Andrea's second phone, the one she thought I didn't know about, wedged between the couch cushions. She must have dropped it in her hurry to leave. For a moment, I just stared at it. Some part of me knew that picking it up would change everything, that whatever I found would be the point of no return. I picked it up anyway. The phone was still logged in, and Andrea had never been particularly careful about covering her tracks. The text messages told a story I'd been trying not to read for months. Chase. Can't wait to have you all to myself this weekend. Booked the penthouse suite at the Driscoll. Andrea. Perfect. Told Eli I'm at a retreat. He's so clueless I could probably tell him I'm on Mars and he'd believe it. Chase. When are you going to leave him? This sneaking around is getting old. Andrea. Soon. Need to figure out the financial stuff first. He makes good money, but he's not exactly sophisticated about hiding assets. My lawyer says I can probably get half of everything plus alimony. Chase. You deserve so much better than some grease monkey. When we're together, you won't have to pretend to be something you're not. Andrea. I know, baby. Just need to play the part a little longer. He's so desperate for my approval, it's actually pathetic. I scrolled through weeks of messages, photos I definitely didn't want to see. Voice memos where Andrea laughed about my adorable attempts to save our marriage. Plans for their future that involved liquidating everything I'd worked for and starting fresh with Chase's money. Chase Dalton. I knew the name. He owned the luxury car dealership where Andrea had bought her BMW last year. Smooth-talking, trust fund pretty boy who'd never worked a real day in his life. I sat in my truck for a long time, holding that phone, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak. That would have been cleaner, easier to process. This was something colder and more focused, like the moment when you stop trying to cap a blown well and decide to let it burn itself out. I forwarded the most damning messages to my own phone, then put Andrea's back where I'd found it, let her think she was still playing her game. But now, I was playing too. I drove toward the Permian Basin as the sun set behind me, and for the first time in years, I was smiling. Not the forced smile I'd been wearing around Andrea, but something genuine and sharp. This time, I said to the empty highway, I'm not the one who's losing. The company trailer in Midland was exactly what you'd expect. A double wide with industrial carpet, fluorescent lighting, and the persistent smell of coffee and cigarettes. But it was mine, and after 3 years of living in Andrea's showroom house, the honesty of it felt like a vacation. My new crew was solid. Ricky Valdez, my lead driller, was a wiry guy from Odessa, with a laugh that could be heard over a drilling rig, and a loyalty that ran deeper than the Permian shale. He'd worked with me on 2 previous sites, and when he heard about my transfer, he'd requested to come along. So, he said on my 3rd day, settling into the passenger seat of my pickup with 2 gas station coffees. You going to tell me what really happened with Andrea? Or are we going to keep pretending this is just about career advancement? We were driving out to check on the morning shift, and the West Texas landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, flat, brown, and honest about what it was. No pretense, no Instagram filters. What makes you think something happened? Ricky snorted. Boss, I've known you for 5 years. You don't just up and leave your dream house for a trailer in Midland because you're feeling ambitious. Plus, you've been checking your phone every 10 minutes like you're waiting for something. He wasn't wrong. I'd been monitoring Andrea's social media, watching her post photos from Austin, fancy restaurants, spa treatments, yoga classes. Always with Brittany, her blonde sidekick who treated gossip like an Olympic sport. But there was something else in the photos, something that made my jaw clench every time I saw it, a silver Porsche Cayenne that kept appearing in the background. She's cheating, I said finally. Crap. Ricky was quiet for a moment. You sure? Found her burner phone, messages going back months. What are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? The old Eli would have confronted her, demanded explanations, maybe tried to fight for a marriage that had been dead longer than either of us wanted to admit. But sitting in that truck, watching pump jacks nod against the horizon like mechanical prayers, I felt something different. I'm going to let her think she's winning, I said. That weekend, I drove back to town. Not to our house, to Murphy's, a dive bar on the south side where oil field workers went to forget their problems, and nobody cared if you smelled like crude. The kind of place Andrea would never be caught dead in, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. I was 2 beers in when Brittany walked through the door. She looked completely out of place in her designer jeans and heels, like a peacock that had wandered into a chicken coop. She was scanning the room, probably looking for someone, when her eyes landed on me. For a second, she didn't recognize me. I'd lost some weight, grown out my beard, and traded my usual work clothes for jeans and a clean shirt. When recognition dawned, her expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been guilt. Eli? She approached my table cautiously. What are you doing here? Having a drink. You? I'm supposed to meet someone. She glanced around nervously. How are you? Andrea said you were working out of town. Permian Basin. Good money, but it gets lonely. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Want to sit? Your date can find you. She hesitated, then sat down. Up close, I could see she was nervous about something. Brittany had never been particularly bright, but she was observant in the way that shallow people often are, always watching for social cues, always calculating her position in whatever drama was unfolding. How is Andrea? I asked, signaling the bartender for another round. She's good, really good. The retreat was amazing for her. Really helped her find herself, you know? I'm sure it did. She seems happy in her photos. Brittany's smile faltered slightly. You've been following her posts? Of course. She's my wife. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Though I noticed she hasn't been posting much from home lately, still staying with you. She's taking some time to think about what she wants. That's healthy. Marriage is complicated. I took a long pull from my beer. She deserves someone who can give her the lifestyle she wants, someone more sophisticated than an oil field supervisor. Something shifted in Brittany's expression. She leaned forward slightly, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could safely say. Eli, can I be honest with you? Please. Andrea's been struggling. With your marriage, I mean. She feels like you two have grown apart, and she's been exploring her options. Exploring her options. I repeated the phrase like I was trying it on for size. That's one way to put it. She didn't want to hurt you, but she's been seeing someone. Someone who can offer her the kind of life she's always wanted. I nodded thoughtfully. Chase Dalton. Brittany's eyes went wide. How did you... Silver Porsche in all her photos. Plus, she bought her BMW from his dealership last year. Doesn't take a detective. For a moment, Brittany just stared at me. Then she seemed to deflate slightly. She's going to end me for telling you. You didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. I finished my beer, but I appreciate your honesty. Most people would have kept lying. What are you going to do? I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table. Nothing dramatic. Like you said, she deserves to be happy. I was almost to the door when Brittany called after me. Eli, for what it's worth, I think she's making a mistake. He's not as nice as he pretends to be. I turned back. What do you mean? He talks about you, about how pathetic you are, how easy it's going to be to take everything you've worked for. He thinks it's funny that you don't know. Her voice dropped. And Andrea laughs along. Something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. Thanks for the heads up. Outside, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, processing. It was one thing to know your wife was cheating. It was another to know she was laughing about it. I pulled out my phone and did some research. Chase Dalton's dealership was having a charity event next weekend, some black tie thing for the local children's hospital, the kind of event Andrea would love, where she could play dress up and network with the kind of people she thought she belonged with. According to the event page, it was being held at the dealership itself, with the showroom converted into a ballroom. Tickets were $500 each, but I had a better idea. I called Manny Rodriguez, an old Army buddy who'd done security work after his discharge. We'd served together in the Middle East, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him get clean after he came back. Manny, it's Eli Carver. I need a job. What kind of job? The kind where I wear a black suit and blend into the background? There was a pause. This about your wife? Something like that. When and where? I gave him the details. Manny didn't ask questions. That was one of the things I'd always liked about him. He understood that sometimes a man needed to handle his business quietly. I'll get you on the security roster, he said. But Eli, whatever you're planning, don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that ends with you in handcuffs? I laughed. Manny, I'm an oil field supervisor. I know how to handle pressure without blowing things up. But as I drove back to Midland, I was already thinking about controlled explosions and how sometimes the only way to cap a blown well was to let it burn itself out first. The charity gala was going to be very interesting. The Dalton Luxury Auto Showroom had been transformed into something from Andrea's Pinterest boards. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, white tablecloths covering the luxury cars, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. The kind of event where people paid $500 to eat rubber chicken and congratulate themselves on their generosity. I stood near the back wall in my rented security uniform, watching the social theater unfold. Manny had gotten me assigned to perimeter security, which meant I could move around freely while staying invisible to the guests. Andrea arrived fashionably late, and I had to admit she looked stunning. Black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her blonde hair swept up in some complicated style that had probably taken hours. She moved through the crowd like she owned the place, air-kissing and networking, with the practiced ease of someone who'd studied social climbing like a science. Chase appeared at her side within minutes, possessive hand on her lower back, and I got my first good look at my replacement. He was everything I wasn't, tall, lean, with the kind of effortless style that came from never having to worry about money. His smile was practiced, political, and it never quite reached his eyes. Handsome couple. Manny's voice crackled through my earpiece. Aren't they just, I murmured back. I watched them work the room together, and it was like seeing Andrea in her natural habitat. This was the life she'd always wanted, the life she'd tried to create with me before deciding I was too rough around the edges for her vision. Brittany was there too, playing her role as the loyal sidekick, though I noticed she kept glancing around nervously. She hadn't seen me yet, but she knew I knew, and that was making her jumpy. The evening's program was typical charity event nonsense. Speeches about the children's hospital, a silent auction featuring vacation packages and artwork nobody really wanted, and a lot of self-congratulatory applause. But I wasn't there for the entertainment. During the cocktail hour, I positioned myself near the ladies' room, knowing that's where the real conversations happened at these events. Sure enough, Andrea and Brittany disappeared inside together, and their voices carried through the door. He knows, Brittany was saying. I ran into him at Murphy's last weekend, and he knows about Chase. What exactly did you tell him? Andrea's voice was sharp. Nothing, well, not much, but he already knew about Chase, Andrea. He figured it out from your Instagram posts. Crap. There was a pause. How did he seem? Angry? Hurt? That's the weird part. He seemed calm, like really calm. It was creepy. I heard Andrea laugh, but it sounded forced. Please, Eli's about as threatening as a golden retriever. He's probably crying into his beer somewhere, trying to figure out how to win me back. I don't know, Andrea. There was something different about him, and Chase has been talking a lot of trash about him around town. If Eli hears about it. Chase can handle Eli. Trust me, my husband isn't exactly intimidating. They came out a few minutes later, and I melted back into the crowd. But I'd heard enough. Chase had been running his mouth around town, making me look like a fool. That was useful information. The silent auction was winding down when I made my move. I'd noticed that Chase had bid on several high-ticket items. A weekend in Napa, courtside Mavericks tickets, a deep-sea fishing trip. Big money bids designed to impress. During a lull in the program, I approached the auction table with my phone. The volunteer managing the bids was a sweet-looking older woman who probably volunteered for everything. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, flashing my security badge. "We've had reports of someone tampering with the bid sheets. Mind if I take a quick look?" She looked concerned. "Of course, officer. Is everything all right?" "Just being cautious. These charity events sometimes attract people with bad intentions." I made a show of examining the bid sheets, then discreetly used my phone to photograph Chase's signature on several items. Not for any nefarious purpose. I just wanted to study his handwriting. "Everything looks good here," I told the volunteer. "Thanks for your cooperation." The evening's climax was supposed to be the presentation of the donation check to the Children's Hospital. Chase had positioned himself at the center of it all, playing the role of generous benefactor while the photographer captured his good deed for posterity. That's when I decided to test the waters. I approached one of the event organizers, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard and the desperate smile of someone trying to keep 100 moving parts in sync. "Ma'am, I hate to bother you, but we've had a report of someone taking photos in the parking lot without permission. Might be paparazzi, might be nothing. You want me to check it out?" She looked grateful. "Yes, please. The last thing we need is some scandal." Can you be discreet? Absolutely. I made my way to the parking lot where Chase's silver Porsche was parked in a prime spot near the entrance. It was a beautiful car, probably worth more than I made in a year. The kind of car that said its owner had never worried about money, never worked with his hands, never had to choose between paying bills and buying groceries. I walked around it slowly, like I was doing a security check. Then I took out my keys. The scratch was small, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Just a thin line along the driver's side door, the kind of thing that could have happened anywhere. But I knew Chase would notice it eventually. And when he did, it would eat at him. I was admiring my handiwork when footsteps approached behind me. Find anything interesting? I turned to see Chase himself, drink in hand, studying me with the kind of casual arrogance that came naturally to men who'd never been challenged. Just doing a perimeter check, sir, making sure everything's secure. He looked me up and down, and I could see him cataloging details, my height, my build, the way I carried myself. You look familiar. Do I know you? Don't think so, sir. I'd remember. But his eyes had sharpened, and I could see recognition dawning. Wait a minute. You're him, aren't you? Andrea's husband? I smiled. Guilty as charged. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then Chase laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. This is rich. The loser husband, working security at my event. How much are they paying you to stand around in a cheap suit? Enough to keep me in beer and self-respect? Self-respect. His laugh was uglier now. Your wife is in there on my arm, planning her future with me. And you're out here playing dress-up security guard. Where exactly is the self-respect in that? I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up slightly to meet my eyes. You know what I've learned in 8 years of marriage, Chase? Sometimes the best way to handle a problem is to let it solve itself. What's that supposed to mean? It means Andrea's all yours, friend. I hope you're ready for what comes with her. I started to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Chase, you might want to be more careful where you park. A lot of jealous husbands out there who might not be as understanding as me. I left him standing there, staring at his scratched Porsche, and walked back into the gala. Through the window, I could see Andrea holding court near the silent auction, completely unaware that her two worlds had just collided in the parking lot. But she'd find out soon enough. Chase would tell her, probably make it sound like I'd been pathetic and desperate. And she'd laugh about it, the way she'd been laughing about me for months. That was fine. Let them laugh, because I was just getting started. Monday morning brought 2 phone calls that changed everything. The first was from Andrea, and her voice had a sweetness I hadn't heard in years. Hi, baby. I'm back from Austin, and I was hoping we could talk. I was standing in my trailer, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the oil field gold. Talk about what? About us, about our marriage. I did a lot of thinking on my retreat, and I realize I've been unfair to you. Maybe we could work something out. The timing was interesting. What kind of something? Well, I heard about your promotion. Supervisor pay is good money, right? Maybe we could find a way to make this work. I could travel with you sometimes, make it an adventure. There it was. She'd found out about the salary bump, and suddenly our marriage was worth saving. I almost had to admire the calculation. That's a big change of heart, Andrea. Last time we talked, you were pretty clear about not sacrificing your lifestyle. People change, Eli. I miss you. I miss us. Where are you calling from? A pause. Home. I'm at the house. Funny. I drove by yesterday and didn't see your car. Another pause, longer this time. I was out, shopping. At Chase's place? The silence stretched between us like a taut cable. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its artificial sweetness. We need to talk in person. I'll be in town Thursday. We can talk then. I hung up before she could respond, and immediately my phone rang again. This time it was Ricky. Boss, you need to get down here. We've got a problem. 20 minutes later, I was standing next to our newest well, watching crude oil bubble up from what should have been a sealed casing. It wasn't a blowout, yet, but it was the kind of problem that could turn into one fast if we didn't handle it right. How long has it been leaking? I asked. Martinez noticed it this morning. Could have started any time in the last 12 hours. I studied the situation, running through options. We could try to cap it, but that was risky with an active leak. We could shut down the well entirely, but that would cost the company thousands in lost production. Or we could do a controlled burn, let the pressure release itself safely while we fix the underlying problem. Call it in, I told Ricky. We're going to let it burn. Sometimes the best way to handle a dangerous situation was to control the explosion rather than try to prevent it. Thursday afternoon, I drove back to town with a plan as carefully constructed as any drilling operation. I'd spent 3 days thinking through every angle, every possible response, every way things could go wrong. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Andrea's perfect suburban showcase, all manicured lawn and decorative shutters. But walking through the front door felt like entering a stage set where I no longer knew my role. Andrea was waiting in the living room, dressed casually but carefully. Designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She'd set out wine and cheese, like this was a romantic reconciliation instead of a negotiation. "You look good," she said, standing to greet me. "The outdoor work agrees with you." "Thanks. You look good too." It wasn't a lie. Andrea had always been beautiful, and she'd learned to toolize that beauty with surgical precision. We sat across from each other in the living room where we'd once planned our future, and the distance between us felt like miles. "So," I said, "tell me about your change of heart." She launched into a prepared speech about self-discovery and realizing what was important, about how she'd been selfish and short-sighted, about how she wanted to make our marriage work. I let her talk, watching her face, cataloging the tells that meant she was lying. The way she touched her necklace when she said she loved me. The way her eyes went slightly left when she talked about missing our life together. "That all sounds great, Andrea, but I have one question." "What? Does Chase know about this reconciliation?" Her face went very still. "Chase? Your boyfriend. The guy whose car keeps showing up in your Instagram photos. The one whose bed you've been sleeping in for the past 3 months." For a moment, she looked like she might try to deny it. Then something shifted in her expression, and the mask came off entirely. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." She leaned back in her chair, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "And you're not angry?" I was. Then I got over it. "Just like that?" I shrugged. "Just like that. I don't believe you." "Believe whatever you want, Andrea. The question is, what happens now?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out what game we were playing and how to win it. "What do you want to happen?" she asked finally. "I want a divorce. Clean, simple, no drama. We split things fairly and move on with our lives." "And if I don't want a divorce?" "Then we have a problem." Her phone buzzed on the coffee table between us. The display showed a text from Chase. "Where are you? Thought we were meeting for dinner." Andrea glanced at the message, then at me. "He doesn't know I'm here." I figured. "What are you going to do? Tell him?" I stood up, walked to the window that looked out over our backyard. The pool was covered for winter, and the outdoor furniture was stacked and wrapped in plastic, everything dormant, waiting for a spring that might never come. "I'm not going to do anything, Andrea. You are—" "What do you mean?" I turned back to her. "You're going to choose. Him or me, tonight." "That's not fair. I need time to think. You've had 3 months to think." "Time's up." Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Chase. This one more insistent. "He's getting impatient," I observed. Andrea picked up her phone, stared at it for a moment, then looked at me. "And if I choose him, then you choose him. I'll file the papers next week. And if I choose you, then we try to fix this. Really try. No more Chase, no more games, no more lies." She was quiet for a long time, turning her phone over in her hands. Finally, she looked up at me. "I choose Chase." I nodded. "Okay, then? That's it? Just okay?" "What did you expect, Andrea? Tears? Begging? You made your choice months ago. This is just making it official." I moved toward the door, then paused. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours next week. Try to keep things civil, all right?" "Eli, wait." I turned back. "Why aren't you fighting for me?" It was a good question, and for a moment I considered giving her an honest answer. About how you can't fight for someone who's already gone. About how love without respect is just elaborate self-harm. About how I'd finally learned the difference between losing someone and letting them go. Instead, I just smiled. "Because you're not worth fighting for anymore." I left her sitting in our living room, staring at her phone, trying to figure out how a conversation she'd planned to control had slipped so completely out of her hands. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. Because while Andrea thought she was choosing between 2 men, I was playing a completely different game. One where she and Chase were about to discover that some explosions can't be controlled. They can only be aimed. The Rusty Spur wasn't the kind of place Chase Dalton usually frequented, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. It was a working man's bar on the east side of town, where the beer was cheap, the music was loud, and nobody cared if you smelled like honest work. I'd been there for about an hour, nursing a shiner and watching ESPN, when Chase walked in looking like a tourist in hostile territory. He was dressed down, jeans and a polo shirt instead of his usual designer threads, but he still stood out like a Ferrari in a parking lot full of pickup trucks. He spotted me at the bar and approached with the kind of swagger that came from never having been truly challenged by another man. Eli Carver. He settled onto the stool next to me without being invited. Fancy meeting you here. Chase. I signaled the bartender for another round. Drink? I don't usually drink in places like this. No, I imagine you don't. He ordered a craft beer they didn't have, settled for a Bud Light, and turned to face me. So I hear congratulations are in order. For what? Andrea told me about your conversation, about the divorce. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Must be hard, losing your wife to a better man. I took a long pull from my beer. Is that what happened? That's exactly what happened. She chose me, Carver. Chose my money, my connections, my future. Everything you can't give her. You're probably right about that. My lack of reaction seemed to frustrate him. He'd come here for a confrontation, and I wasn't giving him one. You know what I don't understand? He continued. How you can sit there so calm. If I were you, I'd be furious, humiliated. Maybe you would be. Andrea told me what you said to her, about her not being worth fighting for. That was cruel, even for a loser like you. I set down my beer and turned to look at him directly. Chase, can I ask you something? What? How much do you actually know about Andrea? He laughed. I know everything I need to know. She's beautiful, sophisticated, ambitious. Everything a man like me deserves. And you think she loves you? I know she does. Because she told you so? Because she chose me over you. I nodded thoughtfully. That's one way to look at it. Here's another way. She chose your money over my money. When she found out I was making supervisor wages, she tried to come back. When she realized I wasn't going to take her back, she settled for you. She's not choosing you, Chase. She's choosing your bank account, just like she chose mine 8 years ago when I was the best option available. His face was starting to flush. You're just trying to make yourself feel better about losing. Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to save you from making the same mistake I did. I finished my beer. But you're probably right. You're smarter than me, more sophisticated. I'm sure it'll work out differently for you. I stood up to leave, but Chase grabbed my arm. We're not done talking. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Yes, we are. Sit down. Or what? For a moment, we just stared at each other. The bar had gotten quieter around us, and I could feel other patrons watching. This was the moment Chase had been building toward. The confrontation where he could prove his dominance over the man whose wife he'd stolen. But I'd been in bars like this since I was old enough to drink, and I knew how these things worked. Chase had money and education, but he'd never been in a real fight in his life. He was counting on his size and his anger to intimidate me. He was about to learn better. Let go of my arm, Chase. Make me, I smiled. Okay. The move was simple, a basic wrist control technique I'd learned in the Army. I grabbed his thumb, bent it back at an uncomfortable angle, and watched him release my arm immediately. Jesus! He jerked his hand back, cradling it against his chest. You could have broken it. Could have, didn't. I dropped a 20 on the bar. Have a good evening, Chase. Take care of my wife. I was almost to the door when he called after me. This isn't over, Carver. I turned back. Yeah, it is. But I was wrong about that. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. The next morning, I got a call from Manny. Your boy Chase has been asking around about you, he said. Wants to know where you're staying, what your schedule is. Sounds like he's planning something stupid. How stupid? Stupid enough that you might want to watch your back for a while? I thanked Manny and hung up, then sat in my trailer thinking. Chase was escalating, which meant he was feeling threatened. Good. Threatened people made mistakes, and I was counting on Chase to make a big one. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I was driving back from a supply run when I noticed the silver Porsche in my rearview mirror. It had been there for about 10 miles, staying just far enough back to avoid being obvious. The road between Midland and the drilling site was mostly empty. Long stretches of nothing broken up by the occasional ranch house or oil pump. Perfect place for someone to do something stupid without witnesses. I slowed down, letting Chase close the distance. When he was about 50 yards back, I floored it. My F-150 wasn't built for racing, but it was built for punishment. Chase's Porsche was faster, but speed wasn't going to help him on these roads. This was about knowing the terrain, and I'd been driving these back roads for months. The chase lasted about 15 minutes. Chase tried to pass me twice, but I knew where the road narrowed and where the shoulders were soft. Each time he pulled alongside, I forced him back, using my truck's size and weight to control the situation. Finally, I saw what I was looking for. A sharp right turn followed by a steep dip that wasn't visible until you were right on top of it. I took the turn at about 40 miles per hour, feeling my truck's suspension compress as I hit the dip. Chase, following too close and going too fast, didn't have time to react. His Porsche took the turn at 60, went airborne for about 20 feet, and landed hard in the shallow ditch on the far side. I stopped my truck and walked back to check on him. The Porsche was nose down in the ditch, its front bumper buried in sand and scrub brush. Chase was conscious but shaken. His airbag deflated around him like a failed parachute. "You okay?" I called through his window. He looked up at me, and I could see rage and humiliation warring in his expression. "You son of a witch, you could have ended me." "Could have. Didn't." I looked at his car, which was going to need a tow truck and probably a new front end. "Might want to be more careful on these roads, Chase. They can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." "I'm calling the police." "And telling them what? That you followed me for 15 miles, then crashed your car trying to run me off the road?" I shook my head. "Good luck with that story." I walked back to my truck, then paused. "Oh, and Chase? Next time you want to have a conversation, just call. This dramatic stuff is getting old." I left him there, waiting for a tow truck, and drove back to my trailer. By the time I got there, my phone was buzzing with angry texts from Andrea. "What did you do to Chase? He says you ran him off the road. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer." I typed back, "Tell Chase to drive more carefully. These roads can be tricky." Then I turned off my phone and opened a beer. Outside my trailer window, I could see the lights of the drilling operation, steady and purposeful in the gathering darkness. Chase had made his play and failed. Now it was time for the final act. The invitation arrived on expensive cardstock with gold embossing, the kind of thing Andrea had always loved. Chase and Andrea Dalton, she was already using his name apparently, cordially invited select friends to an intimate gathering at their new home to celebrate their engagement. Their new home turned out to be my old house. I sat in my truck across the street, watching the preparations. Andrea had redecorated extensively. New furniture, new paint, new everything. She was erasing every trace of our 8 years together, turning our shared history into a blank canvas for her new life. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected. Andrea's social media friends, Chase's business associates, and enough local influencers to ensure the whole thing would be documented online. The kind of people who measured success by Instagram, likes, and thought authenticity was a brand strategy. I wasn't on the guest list, obviously, but I wasn't planning to be a guest. Ricky was waiting in his truck around the corner, along with Manny and 2 other guys from the drilling crew. I'd told them I needed help moving some equipment, which was technically true. "You sure about this, boss?" Ricky asked through the radio. "This seems like the kind of thing that could go sideways fast." "It's going to go exactly the way I planned it," I replied. "Trust me." At 8 o'clock, the party was in full swing. Through the windows, I could see Andrea playing hostess, working the room with Chase at her side. They looked perfect together. 2 beautiful people living a beautiful life, surrounded by other beautiful people who would validate their choices. I waited until 8:30, then made my move. The first phase was simple. I'd kept a key to the house. Andrea had never asked for it back, probably forgot I had it. While everyone was focused on the party in the living room and backyard, I slipped in through the garage and made my way to the home office. Andrea's laptop was right where she'd always kept it, and she'd never been careful about passwords. Her Instagram account was logged in, along with her email and her cloud storage. Perfect. I uploaded the files I'd prepared, screenshots of her text conversations with Chase from months ago, including the ones where they'd laughed about my ignorance and planned to take me for everything I was worth. The photos Chase had sent her. The voice memos where Andrea had called me pathetic and desperate. But I didn't post them immediately. Instead, I scheduled them to go live at 9 o'clock, then set up a live stream using her account. Phase 2 required more finesse. I made my way to the backyard where most of the party had migrated. Andrea had strung lights around the pool area and set up a small stage where Chase was preparing to make some kind of speech, probably the official engagement announcement. I stayed in the shadows, watching and waiting. At exactly 9 o'clock, Andrea's phone started buzzing, then Brittany's, then several other phones around the party. The reaction was immediate and electric. People started looking at their phones, then at each other, then at Andrea and Chase. The carefully orchestrated celebration began to fracture as guests realized they were witnessing something very different from what they'd expected. Andrea pulled out her phone, and I watched her face go white as she saw her own social media accounts broadcasting her private messages to the world. Messages where she'd called her guests shallow and boring, where she'd laughed about manipulating Chase's feelings, where she'd planned to divorce me and take half of everything. "What the heck?" she started to say. But then she saw me. I stepped out of the shadows, still dressed in my work clothes, looking exactly like what I was. A blue-collar guy who'd wandered into a party where he didn't belong. "Evening, folks," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was homicide." The party had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring at me, then at their phones, then at Andrea and Chase, trying to piece together what was happening. Chase recovered first. "What are you doing here, Carver? This is a private party." "I know. Beautiful setup. Really classy." I looked around at the decorations, the catered food, the shocked faces of the guests. Andrea always did know how to throw a party. "Get out," Andrea hissed. "Get out right now. In a minute. First, I wanted to congratulate you both on your engagement. True love is a beautiful thing." I pulled out my phone and opened the live stream app. Andrea's account was broadcasting live to her 15,000 followers, and the viewer count was climbing rapidly. "For those just joining us," I said to the camera, "we're here at the engagement party of Andrea and Chase Dalton. Well, she's not technically a Dalton yet, but she's been practicing the signature for months." "Turn that off!" Andrea lunged for my phone, but I held it out of reach. "Easy there, sweetheart. Your followers want to see this? You've got over 3,000 people watching right now." Chase stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I'm calling the police. Go ahead, tell them your fiance's ex-husband crashed your party and hurt your feelings." I turned back to the camera. "See, folks, this is what happens when you build a relationship on lies and manipulation. Eventually, the truth comes out." The crowd was starting to murmur, some people filming with their own phones, others backing away like they were watching a car accident. Brittany was trying to disappear into the background, probably regretting every conversation she'd ever had with me. "You want to know the funny part?" I continued, still addressing the camera. Andrea tried to come back to me when she found out about my promotion. Turns out love is negotiable when there's enough money involved. "Stop," Andrea whispered. "Please stop." But I wasn't stopping. Not yet. Chase here thought he was upgrading when he stole my wife. What he actually did was buy himself a very expensive problem. See, Andrea doesn't love him any more than she loved me. She loves what he can give her. And when someone younger and richer comes along, I shrugged, letting the implication hang in the air. Chase had heard enough. He came at me fast, probably thinking he could tackle me and end this humiliation. But I'd been expecting it. I sidestepped his charge, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to send him stumbling toward the pool. He windmilled his arms, trying to keep his balance, but physics won. He hit the water with a splash that soaked the front row of guests. The crowd gasped, and several people started laughing. Someone shouted, "World Star!" And the phone cameras multiplied. Chase surfaced, sputtering and furious, his expensive suit ruined. "You son of a witch! Language, Chase! There are ladies present!" I turned back to the live stream. "Well, folks, I think that's enough entertainment for one evening. Remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time." I ended the live stream and pocketed my phone. The party was in complete chaos now, guests arguing, some leaving, others trying to help Chase out of the pool. Andrea was crying, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. "Why?" she asked me. "Why did you do this?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 8 years, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account, who'd thrown it all away for a man with a bigger wallet and a shinier car. "Because you laughed at me," I said simply. "You and him, you laughed at me. Made me feel like a fool for loving you, for trusting you, for thinking our marriage meant something. Eli, You wanted to trade up, Andrea. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you deserved. I walked away then, leaving them to clean up the mess they'd made. Behind me, I could hear Chase shouting threats, Andrea sobbing, and the crowd buzzing with the kind of gossip that would fuel this town's social media for months. By the time I reached my truck, the videos were already going viral. #engagement fail was trending on Twitter. The local news stations would probably pick it up by morning. I drove back to Midland with the windows down, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone was buzzing constantly. Texts, calls, social media notifications, but I ignored them all. I'd spent 8 years trying to be the man Andrea wanted me to be. Tonight, I'd finally remembered who I actually was, and it felt good to be back. The oil field looked different in the moonlight, stark and honest, with no pretense or artifice, just steel and concrete and the steady rhythm of machinery pulling wealth from the earth. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. I sat on my trailer steps, drinking a beer and watching the pump jacks nod against the starry sky. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Lawyers, probably. Definitely more drama than I cared to deal with. But tonight, for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes the only way to cap a blown well is to let it burn itself out. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing by other people's rules. And sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people see who they really are.